Welcome to the ACT podcast. As usual, I'm Lizzie Harewood, and today I'm joined by Ed Robbins from Fresh Start in Education. Now, in this episode, we're going to be thinking about the growing number of children unable to remain in mainstream education and who need some form of alternative provision. We'll think about the complex reasons around disruption, around exclusion, and why some children cannot access mainstream, and ask whether alternative provision is simply about managing behaviour or restoring hope and creating real change. And as ever, we'll be thinking about these things through a Christian lens as well. So lovely to have you with us. Welcome, Ed.
Thanks, Lizzie. Great to be here. Can
you tell us a little bit about yourself, just to begin with, and how long you've been involved in Fresh Start?
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved with Fresh Start since we started. So we just celebrated 15 years, actually just a few weeks ago, had some cake and various things. So it started very small. We've seen it develop a lot over the years, but for the full 15 years. Yeah.
And what's your kind of background?
My background's quite different in many ways. I taught in an independent school briefly a long time ago in my early 20s in primary and infants. And then I lived abroad in India for 8 years or so, working with churches and various different things there. I came back from India to get married, happened to connect with someone from our church who ran a fostering agency and started working with him. Fresh Start came out of the fostering agency and it sort of developed from there, really. And I started doing the accounts. Well, I started doing admin, then I did finance. And over the last sort of 15 years, I've done various accounting qualifications. Then I did an MBA. And then the founder of Fresh Start, Anthony, retired a few years ago when I took over as CEO.
Excellent. So you are kind of in charge. You set the vision. You do all the executive decision making, etc. So you will know Fresh Start very well. But let's take a step back. As I said in the introduction, Fresh Start is involved in supporting a form of alternative provision for students who are unable to attend mainstream schools. Can you tell us exactly what that looks like, not just in Fresh Start, but around the country? And can you give us anything to grasp what the problem or the issue is? How many numbers of children are outside of mainstream provision?
Yeah, amazingly, there's around 100,000 pupils in alternative provision educated every year, which is kind of a crazy number. So there's lots of different types. There's registered ones, which are more like schools. There's non-school or unregistered, which is where we fit in. But it's really, any young person that can't engage with the mainstream school, SEND, illness, trauma. I mean, the list goes on, really, of the reasons they may be in AP. Exclusion's a big one. There's about 9,000 pupils excluded annually. And I think I read there's something like 955,000 days lost to suspension annually as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's when all those sort of factors come together, alternative providers, either attached to schools or ones like ourselves, kind of step in and work with those young people.
Okay, so there's a very broad spectrum of reasons that are involved. What would you say are the most common factors at the moment?
I think SEND is one of the biggest ones, to be honest. I mean, certainly we see that. The vast majority of the young people we work with are SEND, and particularly having EHCPs. I'm not sure generally nationwide, but I think that's certainly one of the highest levels.
Yeah. I've heard anecdotally that parents are choosing to remove children from mainstream and either do some form of homeschooling, and I know obviously that's different to what you provide, or send their child to even an independent or private school, because they feel that they better cater for their children's needs. Of course, I mean, when I think of alternative provision, I think perhaps more classical children who are disruptive, who just can't get on in the school environment, whose behaviour has been incredibly challenging. Would that be still quite a significant sort of proportion of children accessing alternative provision?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's across the sector, and we certainly see a lot of that as well. I think another area is emotional-based school avoidance. That's a big one. Like anxiety, SEMH sort of needs and challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we're here to talk about alternative provision and big picture stuff, but also I'd love to hear more about Fresh Start in Education. How do you work? What's your kind of model of providing alternative provision?
Yeah, so I think we sometimes we call it an outreach rather than a centre base. A lot of alternative provision, they're sometimes attached to schools and they are almost like mini schools often. But
Mhm.
whereas we're outreach, we don't, we have a base, we have a head office, but other than that, all our young people are met with all around the country on a one-to-one basis with tutors that we recruit. So it's very much about going where the young person is, meeting them where they're at. So we go to their homes often, we start in homes. We generally try not to stay in the home for too long because we want to take them out into the community. But depending on the needs that they have, some of them may have not been out of their house for 2 years. Some of them may have not been down from their bedroom for 2 years. So we really do meet them right where they're at. We've had young people we've worked with where we've kind of started the provision through notes under the bedroom door or through the parent up the stairs, and slowly connect and work with them to try and, to help them with right where they're at. So we go from that to libraries, community centres, out and about in the community and for those with maybe more challenging behaviour needs, we might have specific community centres that we hire and work with them in. So yeah, it's very much about being bespoke. And I think we're so privileged because we work one-to-one. We're so privileged to be bespoke. Every young person can probably do with a bespoke education, but that's obviously not possible in the system we have. So I think it's such a privilege that we're able to do that. And for the young people, we can really meet where they're at. And, and our strapline is inspiring hope for a future. And that's really, when we recruit our education specialists, our tutors, we're really looking for that they believe in the young people, that they care about them, that they're interested in them. It's not just going to turn up and teach maths. It's how can I connect with you? Where are you at right now? And take them on a journey. So it's really, so that's really kind of what we're trying to do.
Okay, so you mentioned perhaps young people who say haven't left the house for a couple of years or haven't left their bedroom. What's going on with young people who are finding it so difficult? I mean, I know you can't say the same thing for everyone, but
Mm.
what do you think is behind some of these either behaviors or distress or just inability to kind of access mainstream provision?
I think there's so many factors. I mean, something that we really focus on as an overall kind of philosophy or framework is the thought of behavior speaks. So the reason they're doing that is not just because they're being awkward or being difficult or being challenging, but they are wanting to say something through that. I think, the emotional based school avoidance that we kind of touched on earlier, anxiety around that, as we know, society's not easy for young people often, what they have through phones, social media, peer pressure. I mean, I think it could go on and on really, but I don't think perhaps, well, we see it with parenting as well. Sometimes the challenge is there or that, so I think it's hard to sort of maybe pin one thing, but I think,
Sure.
I think the mental health is a huge thing, particularly for those that have not been out of their bedrooms for a long periods of time. And I think parents often, then they're ill-equipped. They don't really know. It's crazy, isn't it? Become a parent. I've got 6 children, but I didn't then, you don't get a manual, do you, as a parent? You just have to kind of wing it and run with it. And I think, when parents are faced with those sort of challenges or SEND needs or SEMH needs, then, it's very difficult for them. So I think some of it's that as well, having the right support for parents. I mean, we talk to a lot of parents who desperately want help for their children and they're really trying all they can and trying to almost banging their heads against the wall with the school and with the local authority, which is really tough. So yeah, I think that's a challenge as well.
So talk me through a little of the services that Fresh Start in Education provide, because I know you do kind of one-to. Is that all you do? You one-to-one? And is it mentoring? Is it sort of holistic work, or is there also a lot of very kind of subject curriculum based work as well that you would do with students?
Yeah, it's kind of all of that really, because I keep using the word bespoke, it's very holistic. So we have, from what we've talked about, those that haven't been out of their bedroom for a while or that sort of, then also we work, if they're out of school for different reasons, we do functional skills. So we do a lot of academic as well. We do GCSEs, occasionally we've done A levels. So we can do the whole raft of things really, but it is seeing, the young person as a whole person, what are their interests and really connecting with them. So it just is a whole massive range really. It might be that the goal the local authority or the school's given us is let's get them down the stairs and into school. It might be they're disengaged with school, let's get them through their GCSEs. So we really work in any area that we need to with that. Predominantly it's one-to-one. We do occasionally do groups, and we're looking to do potentially more group work actually within the school setting. We've tended not to work in schools. I think the original, when we started, we realized, well, these young people are struggling in school. So the worst thing, or the last thing they're going to want to do, is be taken by one of our tutors into school on the first day. Our aim is to integrate them back into school, but we do look to work in schools, in groups. What we'd really love to be able to do more of is preventative, rather than meeting them once they've been out of school for 2 years, is help them before that.
Sure.
Yeah, and something that we're developing and actually launching in the next couple of weeks is a behaviour framework. So what we've felt is, over 15 years of working with 3,000 children plus on a one-to-one basis, we want to help equip teachers and schools and education professionals with what we feel we've learned from that, particularly around behaviour speaks and that kind of thing. So we're currently in the process of launching it's called our STAND behaviour framework, to start doing that as well.
Okay, that's really interesting. So, and that's been developed in sort of in-house through feedback from your mentors, your tutors.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's really been the kind of philosophy that's underpinned us since we began, and it's been shaped, and we've just realised it works. And it's a different mindset perhaps towards behaviour and towards. We changed some years ago. We had our behaviour management policy, and we kind of made a conscious choice to change it to our behaviour support policy, which was kind of obviously there's a lot more we could say about that, but it was a mindset shift really of how we support behaviour rather than just try and manage behaviour. And so we really feel that's so beneficial for everyone in every setting working with young people, and want to take it forward.
And do you think that can be easily translated to a mainstream setting where there might be, I don't know, a teacher struggling with a class of 30? I'm just sort of, I'm curious, because there are so many different ideas around behaviour at the moment. As you say, whether behaviour is something that needs to be interpreted as, sort of purely communication and unmet needs, or whether perhaps we've over pathologized and there are other theories that also manage to create a calm environment but might take a very different kind of philosophy. I don't know, I'm just interested to know how it would suit a very different kind of environment.
No, I think that's a good question, and that's, as we've been writing, and that's how we've been adapting that for that setting. So but I think with the various changes and reforms and wanting to have more send young people in classes and the like, I think having those tools for teachers is so vital.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And something obviously we learned last week when the white paper was published for special educational needs reform was that funding, particularly for EHCPs, they're going to be reserved for the children with the highest level of need or the more severe need. So therefore, I think there are going to be a lot of parents who are nervous that their child won't get what they feel is the correct support. So just thinking back to Fresh Start, so obviously you're talking about how you're accountable to, is it like a local authority, or you are contracted, aren't you, to do this work? How does that work exactly? Are you in a particular area, a school?
So we're contracted by local authorities. Generally, often it's the SEND department from local authorities, occasionally virtual schools. So either contracted directly by them or by schools or multi-academy trusts. So yes, it's contracted on an hour-by-hour basis with a set goal of this is what we want to achieve over a certain period of time, usually about integrating them into school, depending on the setting, etc. We're nationwide. So I'm based down in Kent, but we have education specialists, our tutors all over the place. So we work a lot in the Midlands, we work a lot in London, and then we're dotted around. And we have contracts with about 100 local authorities and many schools. So it ebbs and flows who refers when, but we're available and we work everywhere.
Sure. And how long would say you have a student that your tutor is working with, could it be completely open-ended as to how long they will be working with that student? As you say, I know you said everything is bespoke. Could it be that you have, 6 months with one student and then, 2 years with another?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of all of those. I think more often than not, they come with a fairly open-ended. Some are very bespoke, very specific, and say, we've got funding for X number of weeks or X number of months. But usually, it's hard to generalize, but often if the view is to get them back into school, then it will really be about how long that takes and working alongside the school with that. Or if we're looking for a new school place, often it can be, or the local authority is, and it can be waiting for that to happen. So
Mm.
currently the average is around about a year that we have young people with. When we first started, it was much shorter. So it's really has, I think, lack of school places and also increase in complex needs as well.
And what do you see in terms of the impact that you are making? How do you kind of measure that?
I think we measure that in terms of across a provision. So we have clear goals at the beginning, and then we see at the end have we met those goals. And we're amazed, and we have a 94% success rate on that, which is incredible. We've had that throughout. We try as much as we can to keep connected with parents and families, and often local authorities is difficult because it's them, the young person's moved on, so they don't know what's happening. We do find that difficult, but that's something we do try and see of what the progress is. But overall, we have a 94% success rate of getting them into, or not necessarily into school, but achieving the objectives that were set at the beginning of the placement.
Sure. And our families in general, I can imagine they'd be very thankful for this kind of bespoke provision for their child. But how do you integrate them into some of the work you're doing? Do you integrate them into some of the work you're doing?
Yeah, where they'd like to be. I mean, there's a very varying degree of input from the parents, and the majority definitely are, as you say, very thankful and appreciative. There are a handful that are very upset with the local authorities and are not very happy with what comes around. So yeah, I mean, the education specialists, they're in the home, obviously there's a lot of feedback to the parents. And we generally, most of our feedback, and if they're not in the home, is via the local authority as our client. But we do include the parents as much as is practical and as much as is helpful for the young person.
Sure. Okay. So I want to sort of tilt our focus a little bit, because we've been speaking about this so far purely from a kind of secular perspective. But obviously, ACT, we want to think about this from a particularly Christian perspective. I know Fresh Start in Education isn't a Christian organisation, Christian charity, but you are. And I was just wondering then how we can think through whether there is some kind of particular biblical mandate for the care and support of children who are struggling. I mean, I think I know the answer, but I'd love to hear what you've got to say.
Well, yeah, I think it's kind of throughout Scripture, isn't it? Really, of caring for the weaker. James 1 talks about looking after orphans and widows in the distress. I think there's on and looking at Jesus calling the children to him. I think there's so much mandate, and I think in terms of offering second chances, I mean, the gospel is all about second chances, really, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I think that kind of underpins the whole thing, really. I mean, it's really giving people an opportunity where they may not have had an opportunity, or even the world, family, that everyone may have given up on them, but it's giving them a sense of hope in that situation.
Sure. And I mean, do you have many Christians working with you? Do you know?
Yeah, within staff, we know within we have about a few hundred education specialists. I don't know. It's not something we ask or something that we
Of course.
No, but we do, and my original friendship with the founder was through a church. So there's a number of people that have been with us a long time that we know from that. There's a strong foundation. Our inspiring hope for a future line originally comes from Jeremiah 29:11. We've sort of changed it a little bit from providing a future and a hope, but that's really kind of again underpins who we are and what we're about. We really want to provide hope, and I think being able to go, I think it's such a privilege. Our education specialists go into some really challenging situations, really challenging homes, but to be able to bring hope and a sense to that young person, it's not over for you. You can do this. There's hope for you. Let's get you back on track. Is such an amazing privilege. We've seen so many lives turned around, and we don't know. I think we'll never know what impact we've had if we hadn't been there, if our education specialists hadn't been there. Drugs, crime, suicide, there's so many potential outcomes. So we don't know, but I think it's amazing to have that privilege to be able to go in and just have, in some ways, just have someone who cares and just is interested in that young person and wants to talk to them. It can almost just start with that.
Sure, absolutely. And it's interesting. We've got a young chap in our church actually who probably would have been a prime candidate for Fresh Start. He was excluded from multiple schools, and he admits himself he had a pretty interesting track record with his behaviour at school. And yeah, I think he has recently come to the Lord, and he is overwhelmed at the opportunity in some ways to start again, to be given a second chance, maybe not in education, he's a very bright guy, but in life, and to be thinking about what it means now to live in a different way. And he's just so hungry and so thankful. And it's been such a privilege to see him grow and mature. And so I can imagine if you get in there, I know obviously we're not necessarily talking about spiritually turnarounds with young people, but I can, the concept of helping someone to do that sort of revolution, turn around, perhaps not go in a certain direction, but help to lead a young person through a path that will ultimately result in the ability to thrive and to have a sense of purpose. Do you have any particular kind of stories of any students you've worked with that might encourage us? I know I put you on the spot there.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, one that we actually, one really fascinating one is a young lad with autism, ADHD, various challenges. When we started with the provision, we worked with him for quite some time. He was very disengaged initially, lots of challenges, but something that the education specialist worked with him. One of the things he started doing was going swimming with him. They did a lot of swimming. Apparently he was challenged to do one-arm swimming, which our education specialist had to learn how to do. But then as the relationship grew and over time, we started talking to the parent, and the dad had various metalwork skills and various other things. And they ended up buying an old horse box, converting it into a donut van. And then part of our provision with the young lad was to do all of that, do some of the woodwork, the design, put all the stuff in. The dad was very capable as well, and then do health, the hygiene certificates and the menus, and then they actually started going out and do it as a business on the side. So that was quite incredible from someone who really was struggling in so many ways and didn't really have much hope for anything. And for the parents, I mean, we actually had them. We had an event last year, and we actually they came down with the van. They gave it to. We had lots of education specialists here. We had our staff had all these amazing donuts. It was just amazing for them, for the parents. Think, wow, our son's able to do this. It's completely transformed his whole life, really. So that's quite an amazing one. We had another guy who was ended up, after working with us for some time, ended up in a Ferrari garage, which was quite incredible as an intern. So yeah, that doesn't happen very often, but yeah.
No, that must be incredibly satisfying.
Yeah.
As you say, prevention is better than cure. Is there anything that you would suggest? So the majority of ACT members and those that are listening to this podcast will probably be working in the mainstream sector. Obviously not all. I'm sure there will be some that are involved in a different offshoot. But what would you say then, from your perspective, is a good way to support a child who is at risk of, say, exclusion for whatever reason, whether that's exclusion because they've had behavioural problems or perhaps just non-attendance? How can we have those kids on our radar? What can we do to put in sort of early intervention that will perhaps prevent them from getting to that stage where they haven't been in school for a year? Some of the children you've mentioned haven't been.
Well, I think as you say, it's very different in a setting of a school, and I understand for the teachers having to deal with so many, it is very challenging. I think I would say pray is one of the first things, which I'm sure every teacher does every day. I have such respect for teachers. I think, I suppose, as you said, there's lots of different kind of perspectives on behaviour, but I think there's some of those thoughts of understanding the young person's behaviour. It's whether, depending on the school setting, whether it's pastoral care or it's kind of recognising they might be playing up for a certain reason. We might not know what that reason is. Is there pastoral care that can be help to support them, or things come in, or referring them to CAMS or counselling? I mean, there's so many different things, but I think I guess it's having the radar there and being aware and seeing, let's see beyond what they're actually doing right now. And if I can't because of time or circumstances, can someone else provide support? Or can I signpost them to something to help with? Yeah.
Sure. And in terms of Fresh Start in Education recruiting teachers or education professionals, where can people go? Because I know that this sounds like something that many Christian teachers, if for some reason, they are looking for a role or looking for perhaps a segue into something slightly different, where can they find out about opportunities?
So our website is freshstarteducation.co.uk, and we're on Indeed as well, advertising all the time. So yeah, really have a look at the website. We have roles in different areas come up at different times. We're always recruiting. We have all our education specialists work on a bank contract, so it's not guaranteed work. So
Sure.
people can join at any point, really, and if there's work in their area or not. So yeah, go to the website and there's specific roles available now, which means we've got young people waiting for people to work with them, or it's more generally joining to the bank.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's great. I suppose my final question is much more of that kind of that big picture stuff. You're called Fresh Start. Why does it matter then? Why does it matter that a child can have a fresh start?
Well, I think, if you bring it back to what we're saying of the gospel and the biblical mandate behind that, I think, we all have been given an incredible fresh start. I think it's a tragedy, when we hear the stories, and I think as a company and as in this sector, you can kind of get hardened to the fact of someone's not been at school for 2 years, but that's horrific, isn't it? And to think that the things that young people go through and the homes that we go to, I think they don't deserve to be in that situation. But so I think, it's inspired by that feeling of, I was lost, I'm found. What can we do to help them where they're at, and try and take them out of that path that they might be on or may not be on, but may end up being on. So I think, it's really, we want to do everything we can to grab them out of the challenge they might be in, or come alongside them and help them out of that situation. And because, I think it's our responsibility to look after the vulnerable as Christians, as human beings, and I think if we can do that in some way or another, that's really what we're about, and really helping them and doing whatever we can.
Great. Well, motivated by the gospel. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ed. Really appreciate you speaking with us. Can you just tell us where we can find out more about Fresh Start in Education?
Yeah, freshstartineducation.co.uk.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Lizzie. Great to join you.